Let's balance you here. Okay. Be situated. Ugh. Let's stay put. We are right here. How many chapters are left? So that's one chapter. 2 chapters. That's a really short chapter. Three chapters. That's 4 chapters. Hey, how are ya? Where was I at? 4 chapters. 5 chapters. 6 chapters. 7. 8. Okay, so there's only 8 chapters left of this. So I'm going to be going to Walmart today. Don't drop. I don't know when, but I will be going to Walmart today. The ranger here at the park is going to give me a ride, and I don't know when he's coming, so I'm just going to read probably as much as possible. Maybe I can get 4 chapters done, probably just 3, but we will see. If you're just tuning in for the first time, I've been reading this on stream for a little bit now. Got that hefty chunk there done. This is Off the Page by LadyCodyBug and Samantha Van Leer. It's about a girl who falls in love with a storybook character, and the storybook character is actually alive, and he comes out of the book to be with her. Bunch of crazy stuff has happened, but anyway, so we're going back to Oliver's perspective. Oliver is the prince from the book. Delilah is the girl who fell in love with him. Her best friend is Jules, and Edgar is like a copycat of Oliver, but not Oliver. The real life version, basically. Alright. Let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with Oliver. In here, everything is too bright. The trees seem neon, the moors glow, and there's a flatness to the landscape that is disorienting, something I never noticed before. I keep bumping into corners and edges, misjudging the space around me. The worst, though, is the claustrophobia. I feel like I'm boarded up, boxed in, like the walls are closing in on me, or at the very least, the pages. This morning, I walked the entire length of the book twice, and I still feel restless. Socks trots behind me, the bells on his saddle giving me a massive headache. Must you make all that racket? I snap, looking over my shoulder. Someone got up on the wrong side of the stable, Socks murmurs. Someone's going to wind up in a glue factory, I counter. Come on, Ollie, look on the bright side. Oh, do tell me the bright side. Socks thinks for a moment. Orville made me a hair mask. What the devil is a hair mask? I don't know, he confides, but it's supposed to help with my split ends. Socks hesitates. I'm sure he'd make you one too if you ask nicely. I don't need a hair mask. I need Delilah. Can I ask you a question? Socks says. You haven't seen me in a while. Do I look different? He blinks at me when I don't respond. Bigger? Smaller? His voice trails off. I hear that sometimes when you're not with someone every day, you notice the changes more. And I've been eating only baby carrots for the past month. You look great, Socks, I say, without even bothering to glance in his direction. He prances about me in a circle. I knew it. I absolutely knew this would work better than the cleanse. You know, I actually feel like I have more energy. Instinctively, I leap over the edge of a page onto the next. Are we going somewhere in particular? Socks asks. No, I say. Okay then. He moves amiably beside me, swatting at the butterflies with his tail, and then a moment later, do you want to play a game? I Spy, maybe? Socks, I don't mind you accompanying me, but right now, I don't feel like talking. He stops and looks at me. I know, it feels wrong, doesn't it? To be just the two of us? Thinking of Frump hurts just as much now as it did 2 days ago. Yes, I say, my voice breaking. I suppose this will never feel right again. Will anything? Socks shakes his head so that his mane streams like silk. What you need, Ollie, is a distraction. Something to lift your spirits. Like your surprise party. His eyes bug out and he grimaces. Can you pretend you didn't hear that? I smile a little. You were the first choice to distract me? Everyone else had something important to do, Sock says miserably. I tried to hang the banners, but I managed to get tangled in them instead, and Captain Crab had to cut me free with the sword. I promise to act surprised, I say. That would be really great, especially when they show you your present. Stop, I interrupt. Just stop. Sock snorts. Woo, that was a close one. So, where is this shindig? At the castle, he says, in an hour. We are at the far edge of the book. It will take nearly that long to reach the castle. I suppose we best get on our way. I start off on foot, but Socks nudges me with his nose. Ollie, he says, for old time's sakes. I want to walk, really. The only way I have been able to even exist here these past couple of days is by wearing myself down to such a level of exhaustion that I simply passed out at night, instead of pining away for what I've lost. But he looks so hopeful that I put my foot into a stirrup and I swing onto the saddle. Socks breaks into a gallop, and the world begins to fly by. The wind catches my hair, and it almost feels like the first time I rode in a car in Delilah's world. With the windows rolled down. If I close my eyes, if I don't pay attention to the letters hanging overhead, it's almost as if I'm still there. We reach the castle, and the drawbridge lowers so Socks can canter into the courtyard. He draws to a halt, his nostrils flaring. Strung across the entryway are nearly 24 of Rapsculio's canvases, each painted with an individual letter, spelling out, "Welcome home, Oliver." The stone arches are decorated with bright banners in all the colors of the rainbow except orange. Socks follows my gaze. That was the one I got tangled in, he confesses. A cake taller than I am has been wheeled into the center of the courtyard. It's decorated with violets, Delilah's favorite, and packed into every available corner is a character from the story. Everyone is here, even the mermaids, who are floating in Socks's water trough. Surprise! They all shout. I glance serendipitously at Socks, and then I put my palm on my chest. Oh my goodness, I cry. I never in a million years expected this. How on earth did you manage to keep it a secret? It is possibly the worst acting job I've ever done, and since acting is my life's work, this is saying quite a lot. Queen Marine embraces me. Are you pleased? Is it too much? Quit falling over. It's perfect, I kiss her cheek. You needn't have made such a fuss. Why, Oliver, it's not a fuss, she says, truly taken aback. You're the closest thing that I have to a son. All right, we have an illustration. There's Oliver riding Socks to the castle. And we got some mermaids down here as well, kind of hidden down there. Ta-da! He's not that fat of a horse. I don't know why they call him fat. He's dumb, but he's not fat. I realized in that instant how much I missed her. Missed all of them, really. Speech, calls one of the trolls, and his brothers take up the call, smashing their clubs against the iron hitching posts. I step onto a mounting block, not because I'm eager to deliver a monologue, but because I'd rather they not damage the castle property. And I clear my throat. Friends, I want to thank you all so much. These past few days have been hard, I know, for all of us. And it may feel as though we have little to celebrate, but instead of focusing on what we've lost, I suggest we focus on what we have. I glance around the crowd. Each other, I say. A cheer swells from the throng, and Scuttle and Walleye begin to chant to cut the cake. The fairies hover near my shoulders, plucking at the velvet of my tunic to draw me forward, towards the delicacy. Captain Crab unsheaths his sword. Would you care to do the honors, Oliver? I lift the blade and I slice the cake. Chivalrously, I carry the first 3 plates to the mermaids who cannot serve themselves. The mood is buzzy. People enjoy each other's company, laughing and waltzing to the music of Trog's flute. Rapsculio and Queen Marine take a turn on the dance floor. Seraphima has a 3rd piece of cake. I find Captain Crab beside the punch bowl, trying to hold a crystal cup in his meaty fist. He takes a swig of the juice. "How is it?" I ask. "Could use a bit of rum." I grin, pouring myself a glass, and I'm about to take a sip when he reaches out and pulls my lower lip down. "Have you been neglecting your gums?" he asks. "Oliver, we've been through this before. Gums are to teeth as soil is to a plant. If you don't take care of the soil, nothing's gonna thrive, eh?" Gently, I place my crystal cup upon the table. "How do you do it? How do you just snuff out your dreams?" "Pardon?" "You clearly want to be a dentist, and instead you're stuck here. The captain of a pirate ship." I meet his gaze. Intense. "How do you get up in the morning, knowing that you'll never have what you want?" Captain Crab seems taken aback by this turn of conversation. "Ach, boy, I cannot understand what you think. I've given up my dreams. I simply make do with what I have." He glances around, waving one hand to encompass this castle. "This party, these people. What could you possibly want out there that you can't find here?" "True love, I think," and I move among the crowd, feeling completely alone. There's a story Queen Marine once shared with me about a blind man who was given a wish by a witch. When he wished for sight, she cast a spell, and miraculously he could see. The world became a circus of color, a whirlwind of movement, a bottomless well of discovery. But one day the witch returned. "You've misunderstood," she said. "I never promised forever." Without warning, without time for preparation, the man found himself in the dark once again. After living in Delilah's world, free and able to make my own choices, returning here feels like being in a prison. Not only is there a finite number of people to see and conversations to have, but my confidant, Trump, isn't even here anymore to share my restlessness. I am sitting in the great hall of the castle, my back against the stone, pitching a ball to strike the far wall and bounce back to me. I do this over and over, and the ball makes a satisfying thwack each time it hits. Queen Marine comes into the hallway wearing an apron, her hands dusted with flour. "Good Lord, Oliver, I thought we were under attack. Is that really necessary?" "Sorry," I mumble. "I'm having a bit of trouble occupying myself." "Well, I could use an extra set of hands. Come into the kitchen." I let the ball drop, and out of nowhere, Humphrey comes flying to catch it in his jaws. Marine is in the middle of making a cake. "Why don't you frost this for me?" she suggests, while I start rolling out croissants. I look at the 3 rounds of cakes and the bowl of pink frosting. I dip my finger into it and taste it. As usual, it's delicious. Maureen is a master baker. "May I ask you a question?" I say. "Who exactly eats all of the stuff that you bake?" "I know it seems excessive," she admits, "but it's always gone at the end of the day. About half of it winds up in Seraphima's tower." Having watched that girl devour everything that was not nailed down at the mall, I hardly find this surprising. I watch Marine roll out a square of dough and begin to slice through it with a sharp knife, cutting it into triangles. "Now it's my turn to ask you something," she says. "What was it like?" I glance at her. "You mean out there? Imagine no boundaries, no walls." She holds up her hand to her throat. "Seems terrifying." "It is, but in the best way," I say. "There are books with so many recipes that you couldn't count them all." I glance around the kitchen. There are ingredients and spices from countries whose names that you can barely pronounce. Pans in every shape and size, and so many people. So many people that you could bake all day and all night and still not feed everyone. Queen Marine's eyes widen in awe. "I can see why you might be struggling to be back here." I pick up the spatula and slap a layer of frosting on top of the first round of cake. "It might not be ideal in your situation, but we all must keep a stiff upper lip, you know. Make the best of things. It's the lot that we've been given." "But by whom?" I ask, jamming the second layer of cake onto the first. "Why should I have to be locked in here just because a woman decided to tell a story?" "Why is the sky blue? Why does the sun rise?" Maureen says. "Can you honestly tell me that this girl of yours in the other world doesn't have to play by play rules as well?" I think of school, of chores, of Allie McAndrews, of all the walls that box Delilah in. I suppose the difference isn't that there is a box, it's that I'm not inside it with her. What you need to do, dear, is find an avocation, something to occupy yourself. Perhaps you could take up whittling, or I hear Sparks has starting a knitting circle. She smiles. Maybe you'll even find that you have a knack for baking. We both look down at the creation between my hands. The confection lists to the left, frosting pooling on one side, with a large crack running down the center where I accidentally speared the cake with a spatula. Or maybe not, Queen Marine says kindly. Rapsculio and I sit side by side in the unicorn meadow. In front of our respective easels, on each is a bare canvas. We both pick up a palette of paints, and I mimic his actions. One of the beasts munch on moongrass just a few feet away from us, completely oblivious to the fact that he is a model. When we think about foreshortening, Rapsculio instructs, we really want to use our eyes. The horn facing us is going to be 10 times larger than the back left hoof, simply because of perspective. He looks at me with so much hope for my understanding that I give him a toothy grin, even though he might as well be speaking ancient Greek. Now, Rapsculio says, pick up your brush and feel the energy. Let the art flow from your mind through your fingertips. No sharp edges, just gentle movements of the hand. He sketches with his paintbrush, and a reasonable facsimile of the unicorn appears on his canvas. I take a deep breath and I draw my first line. You know, he muses, of all of the people in this book, I'm probably the only one who truly understands what you're feeling right now. I frown. What do you mean? Well, after all, I know what it's like to not end up with the girl. I hesitate, my brush hovering over the canvas. But that's not you, that's your character. What is a man if not his character? I shake my head. It's different. You didn't choose to fall in love with Marine. It was written to happen that way. Did you really choose to love your Delilah? Do you remember the exact moment that you made that decision? Or did it just happen? Rapsculio cocks his head. Perhaps your romance was written too, by fate, by the stars. We all have authors, Oliver. Suddenly, Pyro, flying overhead, dips low and startles the unicorn, which goes bolting into the enchanted forest. Rapsculio sighs. I suppose we lost our model. Let's see how you've done. On my canvas, I haven't drawn a unicorn, just 2 stick figures holding hands. Rapsculio clears his throat. Well, he says politely, I think you've really captured its essence. When I burst into Orville's cottage, he is on a ladder, stirring a cauldron 3 times his size. What are you? I shake my head. Never mind, I don't even want to know. It is the first time since I've been back that I feel like I have a purpose. I may not be able to live in Delilah's world, but I know how to get a glimpse of it again. If I could just see her, that might be enough to get me through the day. After all, it's unreasonable to expect me to give her up wholly and completely, instead of weaning myself from her bit by bit. Ollie, my boy, I'm so glad that you dropped by. I can use some help with this. Pyro is suffering from heartburn, and it's a challenge to stir a kilo of sodium bicarbonate into 20 gallons of yogurt. But that's the only way to keep it from tasting like tar. Orville, I begin, do you remember when you showed me my future? Before I escaped the book, the wizard created a plume of smoke that illustrated what was yet to come. A seed, for example, morphed into a vision of a flower. And a strand of my hair allowed me to witness a scene that now makes perfect sense. Me in an unfamiliar home with an unfamiliar woman, Jessamine Jacobs. Of course, Orville says. Do you have something that you can show me the present? Orville looks at me confused. You mean your own eyes? No, I say. I want to see the present somewhere else. I want to see someone else's life. Ah, perhaps a telescope. I don't think that's going to reach quite far enough. Well, this is an enchanted one, Orville explains. He climbs down from the ladder and rummages through a satchel that I've seen him wear numerous times around the book. Sometimes when I'm being called by another character, I use this, he confesses. If my knees are stiff or if I'm just feeling a tad lazy, I check to see if it's an emergency before I expend the effort to hike all the way across the pages. He hands me the brass tube, and I extend it to its full length. How does it work? I ask, peering into one end. Orville snatches it away from me. Not like that, naturally, he chuckles. He sets the scope on the ground and with a flick of his fingers sets it spinning like a bottle. Round and round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Well, that's rubbish, I exclaim. What good is that going to do me? No, that's the spell, Oliver. Say it and it will show you what you want to see. Oh. Feeling silly, I give the telescope a good spin and repeat the incantation. It stops spinning, and the end glows like a beam of a lantern. I lift it to my eye, and I squint. I'm staring at a place I've never seen before, but I know that it's Delilah's world. There are cars and streetlights and billboards. Delilah is there, and Jules and Chris and Edgar. They are all playing what seems to be a miniature form of croquet. Jules starts to swing her mallet, and Chris ambles behind her, wrapping her arms with his own. He starts to count, and she releases the mallet. All the breath leaves my body. Edgar holds Delilah, kissing her the way that I ought to be. I drop the telescope as if it is burning my palm, and I run as fast as I can to page 43. First, I pace. Who does she think she is? She's already found my replacement? I take out my dagger and begin to hack away at the rock wall. Every time I think of her, I picture Edgar's mouth on hers, and I strike the rock until sparks shower. By the time she finally gets around to opening the book, it is hours after I view that catastrophe through Orville's telescope. She smiles down at me as if she hasn't been snogging another fellow all afternoon. I stand up, my fists balled at my sides. You have quite some nerve, I yell. Tell me, will you take anyone, or is it just guys who look like me? Her jaw drops. What are you talking about? I saw you. Orville gave me an enchanted telescope, and I watched you kissing him. Her eyes narrow. You've been spying on me? You've been cheating on me. I have not. I didn't kiss Edgar. He kissed me, and it's not like either of us wanted it, trust me. She tilts her head. How many times did I watch you kiss Seraphima? You knew Seraphima meant nothing to me. It was the part that I was playing, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Fine, I yell. Fine, she shouts back. We stare at each other for a long moment, furious. Then Delilah lifts her chin. Is that all you have to say to me? My eyes flash. Well, I imagine you're tired from your exertions this afternoon. A muscle ticks in her jaw. If all you're going to do is insult me, then I'm going to go. She curls her hand around the edge of the book and starts to close it. It feels like the world closing in on me. Wait, I say softly. The book opens again and she smooths the page flat. You have no idea how hard it was to see you doing that, I confess. It's just for a little while until we can come up with an excuse to stage a breakup. There is a voice at the door. Mrs. McPhee. Delilah, she calls. Who are you talking to? Immediately the world goes dark as Delilah shoves the open book beneath the covers of her bed. No one, she says. Jules. Which is it? Is it no one, or is it Jules? Jules, Delilah answers, flustered. Are you guys having a fight? I heard yelling. We were arguing about something stupid. What movie to see this weekend? No big deal. There is hesitation. It sounded like a lot of shouting for just a movie. We're both PMSing, Delilah says. I'm totally exhausted, Mom. Can't you see that I want to sleep? There is a sound of the door closing, and suddenly Delilah's face comes into view again. Well, that was rather harsh, I murmur. What's this PMSing? You don't want to know, Delilah says. She glances away from the book. I wonder if my mom realized that my phone's plugged into the wall at my desk. So? It makes it considerably harder to be having a conversation with Jules, she sighs. How long until my mother thinks that there's something wrong with me again because I'm obsessing over this book? I'm sorry, I say. I'll try to be quieter next time I yell at you. This, at last, makes her smile. When he touches you, I ask softly, do you think of me? Delilah's eyes are like molten gold. I think of how he's not you, she replies, of how no one ever could be. I stare up at her. She's my sky, my whole universe. Tell me about your day, I say. The next morning, I decide to turn over a new leaf. Baking clearly isn't my forte. Art isn't quite in my wheelhouse. And apparently, stalking doesn't qualify as a hobby. So borrowing some equipment from Scuttle and Walleye, I head to the beach to try my hand at fishing. No sooner have I cast my line than Marina surfaces, her tail slicing through the ocean. You know, fish have feelings, she says reproachfully. So do plants, I point out. How was your kelp salad this morning? In a huff, she dives beneath the surface. For a few moments, I enjoy the sun beating down on the crown of my head, and the lull of the waves and the distant cries of the seagulls circling overhead. It feels good to stretch my muscles as I reel in and cast again. This is something I could get used to. My solitude is shattered by the wet, messy, barking arrival of a tornado of fur, which knocks me to my knees and proceeds to slobber all over my face. Humphrey, I hear. Heel. Immediately the dog sits, his tail still quivering so that he is moving closer, inch by infinitesimal inch. His tongue hangs out so far out of his mouth that it nearly brushes the sand. Seraphima clips a leash onto Humphrey's collar. Sorry, she says. We're still working on basic training. The dog looks up at her. You're so pretty. Your hair looks like the sun. She blushes and pats his head. Thanks, Humphrey. I put down my rod and get to my feet. So, I say, how have you been? Seraphima looks out at the ocean. I keep thinking that it was a dream. The crazy carriage without horses and the indoor marketplace and how well, you know. But it wasn't a dream, Ollie, was it? I shake my head. It was real. Her eyes light up. I was real, she whispers. I never thought about making my own choices before. I mean, when you're a princess, why would you want to be anything other than that? She leans toward me. Conspirational. Can I show you a secret? Yes, I say. Delicately, she lifts the hem of her gown, hiking it to her waist to reveal a pair of blue breeches, stitched to look like a pair of jeans. They're incredible, she enthuses. You can run and climb and dance in these. You could do anything, and you don't have to worry about getting tangled up in your petticoats. I grin. Oh, I know. I'm always tripping over my petticoats. Right? She agrees. I traded Scuttle a needlepoint trivet for his spare pair of breeches, and then it really only took a few hours of sewing to alter them to fit. They look splendid on you, I say. Her eyes grow wide. You won't tell anyone, will you, Ollie? It'll be our secret? Of all of the characters here with me, Seraphima alone truly understands what it was to live in a world other than this book. Ironically, the only person with whom I had nothing in common is now the only one I can really relate to. I suppose that means we're friends. Have you ever been fishing? I ask. Seraphima blinks at me. It's not ordinary princess practice. Well, good thing you're no ordinary princess, I say. A smile unfurls across Seraphima's face. She glances down the beach in both directions, then drops Humphrey's leash. He begins to run in circles, barking at the seagulls, while Seraphima unfastens the skirt of her gown and places it carefully on the sand. Dressed now in her bodice and makeshift jeans, she crouches beside me as I pick up a worm. Ooh, she cries, let me. I watch with no small amount of appreciation as she threads the hook through the worm. Who would have guessed that Seraphima is so bloodthirsty? I watch. She stands, the rod in her hand and the worm wriggling. Now what? She asks. Before I can answer, however, a breeze whips across the beach, whisking her skirt into the air like a kite. As I watch, it catches at her waist and wraps neatly around, fastening itself. That's odd, I say, the only words I manage to get out before being yanked off the beach and tumbled through the pages and phrases and dangling participles that strike me in the face until I land heavily on the parquet floor of the throne room in the royal court. It's been so long that I performed the story that at first I didn't realize what was happening. What the devil is Delilah starting from the beginning? Why not just meet me on page 43, as is our custom? I do not appear on the first page of the story. That is a flashback to my birth, and so while I wait for my scene, the Wonder of Sculio, our villain, convinces me that I must find his daughter, who had been kidnapped and locked in a tower. I am usually alone with Frump, but that's not possible anymore. Humphrey whimpers and moves from edge to edge of the page. What's going on? What's going on? It's the end of the world. We're going to die. Wait, I know. I'll chew through this wall. That'll help. Relax, I tell him. It's not a thunderstorm. It's just a reader. All you have to do is sit next to me and look like a dog. I don't know. I've never done that before. Trust me, you'll be a natural. I can hear the lines being recited on the previous page, and I know my entrance is coming. Rapsculio slides effortlessly from the previous scene into this one, and I open my mouth, intending to ask Delilah what on earth she's doing. But Rapsculio gives me a nearly imperceptible shake of his head, and when I look up at the reader, it's not Delilah at all. It's her mother. We are rusty, but we are professionals. I feel the words pulled from my throat as if they are a ribbon. Save who? I say, scowling. Surreptitiously, I glance at Mrs. McPhee and I see her eyes widen as she squints at my face. Oh God, she's going to recognize me as Delilah's boyfriend. It takes all the effort I can muster to angle my head against the illustration's will so that she can only make out my profile instead of my full features. What is inside this book that you can't live without, Delilah? Mrs. McPhee murmurs absently. She finishes the page and turns to the next. Suddenly, I stand with Queen Marine, trying to explain to her why I'm about to embark on a mission to save this princess. Marine's lips tremble as I speak. I can register the fear on her face as she channels what it must be like as a mother to say goodbye to her son. We've got another image. Ta-ta-ta! Him doing his acting as he is supposed to. She is doing an acting job better than I've ever seen. But then, so is everyone else. They're all bristling with energy, delighted to be read for the first time in months. All but me, that is. I am reliving a nightmare. I gallop through the enchanted forest and outwit the fairies. I nearly drown in the ocean. I cheat the trolls to ensure a safe passage. And all this I do while managing to keep my face turned away from the reader. By the time I am on page 43, scaling the cliff wall, my body is shaking from exertion. When Rapsculio locks me in the dungeon, it's almost a relief because my face is drawn in shadow. Finally, I am pulled to the white sand of Ever After Beach. Humphrey is trying to eat the wedding rings attached to his collar. The mermaids wave from the breakers, the trolls hold the poles of the bridal canopy. The fairies have twined ribbons around them, and Seraphima, as always, is in my embrace wearing her silver wedding gown. And a pair of jeans underneath. As Mrs. McPhee's eyes skim the last words of the fairy tale, I am drawn inexorably towards Seraphima. I think of Delilah kissing Edgar. And just as Delilah said about that kiss, all I can think about is how Seraphima is the wrong size, the wrong shape, the wrong everything. How she isn't Delilah. But my lips stay pressed to hers, glued by a happily ever after, until the back cover is closed. Around me, the other characters start to cheer. Well done! Bravo! That was excellent! Did you see the part where Oh, how I've missed performing. I fall to my knees as if I've been punched, gasping for breath. Rapsculio claps me on the shoulder. Just like old times, right, Oliver? He says, smiling widely. His words are the match that ignites the fire within me. Staggering to my feet, I start to run as fast as I can. I move across the pages so quickly that the scenes blur behind me. I don't stop to see where I am. I run until I passed my first scene and the one before it, through the dedication, skittering past the copyright, until I skid into the great white morass of the title page. There I hesitate, momentarily dizzied by the empty expanse. There's nowhere else to go. But that isn't going to stop me. I hurl myself headlong into the margin, bouncing back. I beat myself against the cardboard cover over and over until my hands come away bruised. And still, I force myself upright again, launching my body against the boundaries of this book. Finally, battered, I fall backwards on the frontispiece. My fists have smudges of blood on the vast white surface. I stare up at the sky at nothing. After a moment, I come up on my elbows, still panting. I flex my aching fingers. I watch the bruises fade. I watch my blood vanish, as if it never existed. As if I never existed. Whoops. All right, a word from the author. All of the world's a stage, but actors aren't the only ones who play roles. Even when you're not following a script, you might as well be. You don't behave the same way in front of everyone. You know what makes your friends laugh and what makes your parents proud and what makes your teachers respect you. And you have a different persona for each of them. Given all these performances, how do you ever know what's up, Nebraska? The wind is up. Temperature's down though, that's for sure. How do you ever know who you really are? Well, you have to find that rare someone for whom you're not putting on a show. Someone who shines a spotlight in your direction. Not because you're who they need you to be or who they want you to be, but just because you're you. Oh, God, my back. I do love Nebraska, though. I really like Nebraska. I don't know how to explain it. I love the wide open country and everything. Alright, moving on to Delilah. So going from Delilah's point of view, the really crappy thing about being a teenager is that even if you have a legitimate, monumental problem, the sky is falling, or the zombie apocalypse has begun, or you've contracted the plague, you still have to do your geometry homework. So in spite of the fact that I am possibly having the worst Tuesday of my life, and my boyfriend is trapped in a fairy tale, and my best friend is hooking up with his clone, I have to prove that two triangles are congruent. The way I am selling this to myself is a promise. If I finish this proof, I will let myself take an hour to talk to Oliver before I have to drag myself away to write an essay about the fall of Troy. Suddenly, the door of my bedroom slams open. I turn, scowling, ready to lace into my mom again about privacy. But it's Jules. I can't find him, she says, completely on edge. He's not at home. He's not answering his phone or his texts. It's like he's totally vanished. Who? She blinks at me. Edgar. Oh my God, did you not even notice that he wasn't in school today? Seriously, you're supposed to be his fake girlfriend. Well, maybe he's just sick. He's literally been in a bubble for the past 3 months. Or, Jules says, her eyes flickering to the fairy tale on my dresser, maybe he's back in the bubble. What? No, he's not. Well, did you check? I don't have to. Oliver's in there, which means Edgar's out here. When was the last time that you talked to Oliver? Jules asks. A cold panic settles over me. If Oliver had sprung from the book again, he'd come straight to me. I know he would, wouldn't he? Jules and I both scramble for the book at the same time. I fling it open to a random page, one where Oliver is riding Socks to Orville Cottage with his trusty dog trotting along beside them. But I do it so fast that the saddle is facing backwards with Oliver in it, and Humphrey has a turkey leg clamped in his jaws that Socks is hissing at him to hide. As soon as they all see my face, however, they relax. Thank goodness it's you, Oliver says. Who else would it be? You'd be Sir... Is Edgar in there? Jules interrupts. Unfortunately not, Oliver mutters. Why? Jules groans. You're useless. I beg your pardon? Sorry, I murmur. I'll talk to you later, okay? I lower my voice to a whisper. She's having boy problems. I gently close the book, hugging it close to my chest. You seem awfully obsessed with Edgar, given the fact that less than 24 hours ago you were on a date with a different guy. That's kind of why I need to find him. Jules flops down on my bed. I broke things off with Chris today. My eyes widen. Really? Chris is great. He's smart and funny and cute, but Edgar told me that if you soak a body in pineapple juice for a week, all the skin will fall off of it. Wow, he sounds dreamy, I say. He gets me, and he's wicked hot. Well, you know. She glances up. How long until you can break up with him? How long until the gossip spreads that we're sister wives? I'm smiling, but I'm also thinking about how it's going to feel when I watch Jules and Edgar walking down the hallways at school, holding hands, whispering to each other, existing in their own little world. As happy as I am for Jules, I have to admit that it's going to be hard to see her get everything she's wanted while I lose everything that I had. All of a sudden, Jules' phone buzzes. It's him, she breathes, finally. But as she reads the text, her face goes white. She passes me the phone. I know we don't really know what we are, but you're the closest thing I have to a friend here, and I need you. My mom's in the hospital, and I just don't know what to do. Jules leaps off the bed. Come on, she says, we have to go. I don't know if I've ever seen Jules so rattled before. Very little shakes her, but her eyes are dark with worry, and she has a death grip on my arm. I want to be there for my best friend, but I don't know if it's my place to show up uninvited in a hospital room. I don't know if Edgar would want me there. You're his fake girlfriend. You have to be. It's not until I get into the car that I realize that I'm still holding the book. Hospitals creep me out. They smell like cleaning fluid and bleach, which you eerily know is just to cover up the smell of puke and blood. The lights always flicker, people walk through the halls crying sometimes, and it's like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I think the reason that sick people recover is just so that they can get the hell out of there. Edgar texted Jules to the floor where we're supposed to meet him. When we get off the elevator, there's a nurse's station straight ahead. Jules gets us a visitor's pass, and we walk in silence down the hallway. Just before we reach Jessamine's room, Jules turns to me. I don't know what I'm supposed to say to him. Then don't say anything, I tell her. Just be here so he has someone to talk to. We peer through the open doorway, and both of us abruptly stop. Jessamine is lying in the bed, asleep. She looks tiny, ethereal, like fairies in Oliver's book. Like she's already halfway disappeared. The thing about a mom is that she's always there. She's the one who rubs your back when you have the flu, who manages to notice that you have no clean underwear and does your wash for you, who stocks the refrigerator with all of the foods that you love without you even having to ask. The thing about a mom is that you never imagine taking care of her instead of the other way around. My mom has worked 2 jobs for most of my life just to keep us afloat. When she's not cleaning her clients' house, she's, well, doing the same thing in our house. I can't picture her taking a sick day, much less being in a hospital. To be sitting at her bedside the way Edgar is at his mother's now would be like waking up one morning to find out that the sky was green and the grass was blue. I try to remember the last time I thanked my mom for everything she's done for me, and I can't. With a pang, I resolve to do it as soon as I get home. I guess we all assume that tomorrow we'll say those words, or hug her just because. I bet Edgar thought that too. His arms are folded on the mattress, and his head is pillowed against them. "Edgar," Jules says, and he looks up. He glances at his mom, making sure that she's still sleeping. Then, holding a finger to his lips, he steps into the hall and closes the door gently behind him, leading us into an empty lounge. On the television, SpongeBob is playing, muted with subtitles. Jules throws herself into his arms. "You came," he says, relieved. "What happened?" I asked. "She fainted," Edgar says. "Again. And I know you thought that she was all better now, and that it was probably nothing." To my shock, his eyes fill with tears. But the thing is, it wasn't nothing. The explanation tumbles out in a rush of syllables and grief. Glioblastoma, neural subtype, fatal. I stare at him. I don't think there are any words in the English language to express how I feel right now. Edgar's mother was dying of a brain tumor, and Oliver and I were too selfish to bring him back here to spend time with her. "I'm sorry," I managed to say. "I'm so sorry." "How long?" Jules whispers. "Months." Edgar wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. "It could be a little longer if she got chemo and radiation, but it's only like a stay of execution. It means she gets 15 months of puking and baldness and wishing she were dead before she really is. When my dad died, it took years. It was a living hell. My mom doesn't want to go through that. She doesn't want me to go through that." He buries his face in his hands. "I can't lose her too," he whispers. "I'll be completely alone." What happens to you if you don't have any parents? Are there even orphanages anymore? Oliver never mentioned any grandparents or uncles or cousins visiting. I think of Edgar rattling around in his house all by himself, suddenly having to be the grown-up. Edgar sinks into a chair. I can't stop thinking of all those stupid video games I used to play. My mom would say, "Hey, let's take a walk," or "Want to run errands with me?" I blew her off every single time, and instead, I'd pick up that stupid controller. He looks up at me. "In a video game, when you die, you get a reboot. You start over. How come real life isn't like that?" I watch Jules fumble for something in her pocket. Then she takes out a small piece of coral, curved like a J, and rubs her thumb over the edge. Then she looks at me. When you're best friends with someone, you don't have to speak to know what she's thinking. You don't have to hear her cry to know that she's breaking into 1,000 pieces inside. Jules presses the coral into the palm of Edgar's hands. "Life can be like that," she says. "Go to the place where you're invincible." Switching over to Edgar's point of view. The conversation about her death was the worst conversation of my life. "Sit next to me," she said, patting the hospital bed beside her. "I'm not going to break. It started with a headache that wouldn't go away, and then one day I couldn't make sense of things. I thought I was hallucinating. I saw a boy who looked like my son, but who I knew wasn't. The doctors all called it Capgras syndrome, when you believe that a close family member has been replaced by an imposter. I went to a psychiatrist first, but he referred me to a neurologist, someone who could take a look at my brain. The MRI found the brain tumor. It's in the glial cells. They're sort of the glue to the nervous system. They hold neurons in place, and they supply nutrients and oxygen to the brain. They insulate one neuron from another, and they destroy toxins. Finding out that you have a glioblastoma is kind of like finding out that you have termites eating the structure of your house. They don't eat the aluminum siding, your plumbing, or your appliances, but good luck on living in that house. As she spoke, it felt like I should have been kicking. I should have been screaming, turning over tables, yelling at the top of my lungs. But instead, I just felt numb. As she spoke, I felt like my mother should have been sobbing, shouting, cursing. Instead, she was relating the details in an even voice, as if she had practiced. It was like we were having a discussion about something horrific that was happening to two people who were not us. The reason that we moved from Wellfleet was because the best neurologist in New England happens to be here at St. Bridget's. When you were at school, I was at appointments, and I was trying very hard to get the courage to tell you what was happening to me. I don't get it. Why can't you have surgery? I asked. What about chemo? This type of tumor is so similar to normal brain cells that it's impossible to treat without destroying a lot of healthy cells too. So any medicine or operation is only going to prolong the inevitable. I'm going to die, Edgar. The question is whether I want to spend 15 months suffering through a treatment that isn't going to cure me, or if I'd rather have 4 perfect months with you instead. I swallowed hard. Does it hurt? I asked. Only when I think about what I'm missing, my mother said. Cheering for you on your graduation day, dancing with you at your wedding, holding my first grandchild, watching you grow up into a magnificent man. But I couldn't imagine growing up without her there to witness it. I took a deep breath and tried and could only see a great big blank. It felt like I was going to be sick. What happens to me? What am I supposed to do without you? Your birthday's in a week. You'll be 18, which means legally you're an adult. You have cousins in California that you can live with. You can go to college. Your father and I set enough money aside to make sure of it. You'll go on, and you'll live a spectacular life. What I wanted in the middle of that conversation was do-over. Like when I used to go to the town pool with my mom and practice my somersaults off the diving board and wound up doing belly flops instead. That one doesn't count, I would yell from the edge of the pool, and she would nod, and I'd start again. I wanted this hospital room, this conversation, this reality, to not count. I wanted to go back in time to before we were in this hospital, before I went into her office at home, before I found out her secret. I tried to tell her this, but what came out instead was, I should have said I love you more. I'm your mom, she said. Don't you think I know? I started to cry then. After my dad died, I thought I was safe, that the world could never get that bad again. I figured the worst had already happened and things would only get better from there. But I managed to win the suckiest lottery twice. 2 parents with terminal illnesses. I thought of how I willingly left my mother to go into a stupid book, giving up months that I could have spent with her. I thought of how she would tell me to clean my room or take my dirty dishes to the sink, and I would tune out. When now I want to keep her speaking so I would never forget her voice. It's not fair, I whispered. Oh, Edgar, she squeezed my hand. Life's not fair. When I was in the fairy tale and miserable and Oliver came to check on us, I instinctively told him that things were great even though they weren't. It was Frump who said afterwards that we all hide things to make the people we love happy. So I forced a smile onto my face and a square peg in a round hole, a shoe 2 sizes too small. I told her we'd better start working on her bucket list. Yep. When I was 5, my mother and I went apple picking on Cape Cod. It was September, and the farm had a corn maze. The air smelled like cider and fresh-baked donuts. And families were dotted through the orchard, collecting apples in canvas sacks. It was sunny and cold all at once, and the sky was so blue that it looked like a movie backdrop. A shaggy horse pulled a wagon to the parts of the orchard where the trees hadn't been picked over yet. My mom and I walked as far as we could to the edge of the field where a bored teenager took our money to let us into the maze. The stalks were taller than me. I ran down the straight edge of the corridor, high-fiving the fronds like they were my adoring fans. My mom chased after me, careful to make sure that I didn't get too far ahead. It was dusty and dry, and after about 15 minutes, my eyes and my throat began to itch. My mother scooped me up and put me on her shoulder so that I could be her periscope. But even with that vantage point, we weren't tall enough. I was pretty sure that we were going in circles. After a while, the sun lit the tips of the cornstalks as if they were candles. I was hungry and tired, dead weight in my mother's arms. Edgar, she said, desperate times calls for desperate measures. Instead of turning at the next fork in the maze, my mother kicked at the stalks with her boots, creating a small passage. Like ghosts, we began to walk through the walls. Finally, we got spit out on the far edge of the farmland, in a field we had never seen before. It was like someone had pulled the ripcord and night floated down over us. Where are we? I asked. Everything looked unfamiliar, and I was starting to get this weird feeling in my stomach that came when I was scared. My mother took my hand. Let's find out, she said. And just like that, I wasn't afraid. I was on an adventure. Jules is right. My mother is going to die if she stays here. But what if she didn't have to? Given the number of times that characters have traded places with ordinary people, there's gotta be a way. And no one would know that way better than the author of the fairy tale. But that means coming clean with my mother and explaining everything that's happened. When my mother's eyes open, they are foggy for a moment, and then they fix on me. How are you feeling? I ask. She doesn't answer, she just nods. Mom, there's something I have to talk to you about, and it's going to be hard for you to believe, so I have witnesses. I motion for Delilah and Jules to come inside. Delilah is cradling the book in her arms. You know Delilah already, and this is her best friend Jules. They step into the room gently, as if the floor is made of lava. Jules, hello. And Delilah, my mother says, it's good to see you. I'm really, sorry to hear that you're sick, Delilah says. If there's anything I can do. You already have. You've made my son very happy, she smiles at me. That's kind of what I need to talk to you about, I tell her. Delilah isn't really my girlfriend. I pull up a chair beside the bed and I sit down so that I could take my mother's hand. And when you thought that I was an imposter living in your house, you weren't really that far off. My mother frowns and tries to sit up in bed. I don't understand. Delilah takes a step forward. It all started with me, she says, gesturing to the book. I found your story in my school library, and I fell in love with it. I read that fairy tale 10 times a day. I knew every word forward and backwards. And then one of the characters spoke to me. It's always nice to hear when a reader feels a connection to a character, my mother says. No, Delilah says, this character actually spoke to me. It was Oliver, I jump in, the prince you wrote. Except he didn't want to be a prince. He wanted to be real, and he wanted my help escaping the book. So I did everything I could think of to help him, including coming to your house and asking you to rewrite the ending. But I wouldn't, my mother says, remembering. No, I agree, and to be honest, I thought she was nuts until I opened the book and Oliver spoke to me too. But that's impossible, my mother says, and then she relaxes against her pillow as if it suddenly all makes sense. This conversation isn't happening. It's the medication. We figured out a way to get Oliver out of the book, I tell my mother, but it meant that someone else had to take his place. Me. Edgar, honey, I know this has been a really difficult day for you. There are people here that you can talk to who can help. He's not crazy, Jules interrupts. I was inside the book with him, and Delilah's been there too. I know it sounds insane, and I know every fiber of your being is telling you not to believe this, but you have to, because it's true. My mother turns to me. All right, she says, in the tone that she used to placate someone who's nuts. I know it doesn't make sense. Somehow we edited the story so that the book would think it needed me instead. Would think that I was the main character and not Oliver, and it worked for a little while, but the book has a mind of its own. When something's not right, it corrects itself. Well, of course, my mother says, as if having finally begun to speak English. What you're describing, that's what writing is. Characters get up and walk away with a plot all the time. She's not getting it. For a few months, Oliver was pretending to be me, I tell her, remembering what she had said earlier. I saw a boy who looked like my son, but who I knew just wasn't. That was what made her go to the doctor in the first place, and even if she hadn't been delusional, just really observant, it was also what made the doctors do the test that found the tumor. What if they hadn't? Would she not even know that she was sick? Would that be better? I push aside the thought. Oliver is Delilah's boyfriend, I continue. Me? I was hidden inside your story. My mother looks from me to Delilah to Jules, as if she just can't understand our strange conspiracy. Edgar, she says quietly, there's no such thing as fairy tales. A long time ago, when my mother first wrote that book, she thought otherwise. I guess life can take you to a place where you are completely different from the person you used to be. Before I know what's happening, Jules yanks the book out of Delilah's arms. She flips it to the page where Oliver is climbing the tower wall. He looks up and sees a familiar face and smiles. Oliver, she says, there's someone who wants to say hello. She turns the book so that it's facing my mother. Oliver's eyes dart up, and when he sees my mother's face, he looks shocked, but recovers quickly. He grimaces and hangs on more tightly to the rock wall, doing his job, assuming that he isn't supposed to speak. I lean in closer to my mother so that he could see my face too. Oliver, I tell him, it's okay to talk to her. Very slowly, his face turns towards us. Hello, he says shyly. It's quite a pleasure to officially meet you. My mother's face goes white. This is not happening. I'm sorry, should I perhaps go back to hanging on the wall? Oliver asks. But before I do that, might I just say, I loved playing your son for a little while. You are an excellent mother. After a long silence, my mother begins to speak. When I was still a writer, I felt like the characters were speaking to me. I could hear them so clearly in my head. Maybe they were, Delilah says. Maybe you just never answered. Once when I was little, I came home from kindergarten and my mother wasn't waiting for the bus at the end of the driveway. Hunching over, wearing my backpack like a turtle shell, I called her name. I wanted her to show her the finger painting that I had done that day and give her the macaroni necklace that I made. But she wasn't in the kitchen making me lunch either. I began to walk through the house, opening the doors, getting more and more panicked. What if something bad happened to her? What if something bad was about to happen to me? The last door I opened was the door to her office. On the walls were sketches of a pirate ship, of princesses, of castles. There was a painting on her easel of a fire-breathing dragon and a prince staring him down, all reds and oranges that looked like the coils on the stove that I wasn't supposed to touch. My mother was sitting in her chair, her eyes were closed, and her head was tilted back so that her face was lifted to the ceiling. "Mom," I said, and when she didn't answer, I repeated it a little louder. "Shh," she whispered. "They're talking to me." I look around the room, but we're completely alone. Who? At that, her eyes popped open. "The characters," she said, and smiled. My mother looks at me blankly when I try to explain the concept of Easter eggs in games and video games. It's like when you're watching The Phantom Menace and you realize that E.T. is in the Senate with the Palpatine supporters. Jules interrupts. It's like when you put your winter coat on for the first time in months and you find $20 in your pocket. So, something unexpected, my mother says? Yeah, I add. But in video games, when you find one, you can sometimes skip a whole level of play or wind up at the end of the game or even just automatically win. A shortcut, Delilah says, simplifying. We found the ones that you put into the book. The lip gloss compact on the copyright page and the star cookie. I meet my mother's gaze. Every time someone reads your fairy tale, Rafsculio falls out a tower window and dies. But not really, because the next time the book is opened, there he is again, conning Oliver into helping him. I take a deep breath. There is no death. There's no sickness. The book won't allow it. If you can tell us where you've hidden just one more of those gateways, we can go inside, and once we're there, we get to live forever. She is silent for a moment. Edgar, she says finally, you have some imagination. So did you, which is why I think this might work. I reach for her hand. You just had a conversation with Oliver, right? So you know that it's possible to exist. No, not exist. Live inside the book. And in spite of what you want to tell yourself, it has nothing to do with the meds you're on. If Oliver and Maureen are willing to trade places, and if you and I follow the plot instead of messing with it, there's no reason the book wouldn't take us. Sure, I'll have to wear tights for the rest of my life, but that's okay if it means that you're with me. And there are worse things than having the day job of being a queen, right? I hesitate. Mom, really, what have you got to lose? My mother's been awake for an hour now, and I can see that she's exhausted. Even if this were true, which it can't possibly be, I couldn't tell you where to find a portal, she says. She sighs. I didn't create them. I look at Delilah and Jules. If you didn't, who did? I don't know. Students write papers about themes and symbolism in books, and half the time the author never planned any of it. It just happens. You mean like subconsciously, Jules asks. Maybe, my mother admits. Then who's to say there's not another subconscious secret passage somewhere? We just have to find it, I say. But they're not what you think they are. They're not bonuses or extra points. They were wishes. The only reason they worked when they did was because the person who stumbled across them believed wholeheartedly. A wish is just words. Belief is the catalyst. It's what sets the wish into motion. When two people want the same exact thing and that wish is caught between them, there's nothing more powerful. Then why don't wishes come true every day, I ask her. If we both want you to get better, how come it's not that simple? She looks at me, her eyes wide and sad. This world isn't filled with magic, my mother says. Why do you think so many people escape through fiction? She sinks into the pillow, her voice fading. Edgar, I think I need to close my eyes for a little while. I slip out of the room, followed by Delilah and Jules. Do you think she's right? Jules asks. That they weren't portals or escape hatches, they were just two people believing in something at once? Then why did you get sucked into Seraphima's wish, Delilah asks her. You clearly didn't want to go into the book, but you wound up there anyway. And for the record, Oliver and I did plenty of simultaneously wishing for him to get out of the book, and it did nothing. I don't know, I say, my mind buzzing. I don't have the answers. I just know that I have to find them quickly. And I think I know who might be able to help. All right. Next chapter. Ooh, gonna drop you there for a second. We're gonna switch over to Oliver. I know something is wrong. I knew it the moment Edgar told me to say hello to Jessamine, and I saw the wires and tubes hooked up behind her as if she were one of Orville's experiments, I knew from the look on Delilah's face before she closed the book, telling me she would explain everything as soon as she got a chance. I have been pacing the bottom of page 43 waiting for her, but she hasn't opened the book. Love isn't what you expect it to be. You imagine being drunk on happiness, but the truth is you worry all the time. Is she ill? Hurt? Might she meet someone else? There's a moment when you realize that you've gotten everything you wished for, and right on its heels is the understanding that this means you have so much more to lose. By the time I feel the ground shift under my feet and the book beginning to open, I've worked myself into a frenzy, imagining all manners of horrors. To my surprise, however, Delilah doesn't open the book to our usual page. I find myself springing through the story until I am flung hard into Orville's copper cauldron. He winces in empathy. I sit up gingerly, only to have Humphrey smack into my face and send me sprawling on my back. Socks trots onto the page, panting. Feeling that cardio, he says. The scene swims before settling into place, and I glance up surreptitiously to find Delilah in the company of Jules and Edgar. Are you all right? I asked Delilah. What's going on? And don't bloody close the book on me this time. I'm fine, Delilah assures me. But Jessamine, she's not. She's very sick, Oliver, and she's not going to live much longer. I watch Socks and Orville process this information. Like Frump? Socks asks after a minute. Not exactly, Delilah says, because this time we know it's coming. I look up at her, and you think you can stop it? Edgar is the one who answers. I think we can, he replies. I know what he's going to say before he even says it, and I am holding my breath, hoping that if Edgar plans to bring his mother into the book permanently, he also means to join her. Because then I get to leave. When we listen as Edgar outlines his plan, if Jessamine enters the books, she will automatically heal. Just like it made Jules's hairs begin to turn blonde and Frump became a dog again. The story will do what it has to make her fit into the role of Queen Maureen, who is blissfully, absolutely healthy. But you scoured the pages, Orville points out, and you only found that single star biscuit when you were looking for an escape. We may not need another portal, Edgar explains. My mother swears that she didn't write that intentionally into the book. She says it was just a wish that happened to be in the right place at the right time, basically. It's a puzzle, Delilah says. We only have to figure out what all the swaps had in common. The first was Edgar and I. We didn't have any special shortcut unless the one counts the revised plot. I glance at Delilah. And since you and I were never able to get me free using Rapsculio's easel or ripping the pages or writing me out of the plot, we know there must have been some key point that made the difference. An equal trade, Orville says. A body for a body, Oliver. You couldn't leave the story no matter how badly Delilah wanted you to because there was no one to take your place. Right, but both Edgar and Oliver were willing to make the switch when Seraphima came out of the book. Delilah points out. Jules got dragged in unwillingly. Maybe the wishing doesn't have to be two-sided, Orville suggests. Then why wouldn't I have been able to get out on my own, I ask. Why didn't a stranger get sucked in? I was the only one reading the book, Delilah points out, and I did it in secret because I was so embarrassed to be reading a kid's story. Which meant that there wasn't any male near you who could be pulled into the story in my place, I finish. Socks whinnies faintly. I don't mean to be a bother, he asks, but why did Humphrey wind up here? He was with us when the book was open, I say. We were all watching Orville cast the wishing spell on Frump. Orville nods. What this tells us is that for permanence's sake, the story wants a replacement similar enough to the original character to be able to mold them in the same image. Then how come when I wished to be with Oliver all those times, I didn't accidentally switch places with Seraphima, Delilah asks. Before any of us can respond, Humphrey wanders to the far corner of the page and begins to lift his leg. No, I shout. For heaven's sake, Humphrey, we don't do that here. There are rules in this world. Humphrey's ears droop. I'm sorry, I'll pack my things and go. Actually, I don't have any things. I'll just go. Wait, Orville says, his eyes gleaming. You're onto something there, my boy. There are rules in this world, and we must play by them, as I've said before. Yet in a story, anything is possible, so the wish must originate here. I try to make a mental list of everything we've covered so far. If two people switch and only one of them has consented, there has to be an aid involved. A cookie, a portal, a spell, a magic lip gloss. If, on the other hand, two people want to switch, having given mutual consent, I probably wouldn't hit him at all. Why would you... I mean, like, are we talking about a man we know or a man you don't know? Like, are we talking about a man we don't know? Given mutual consent, that can happen without any physical shortcut. All it takes is the power of the wish. I look up at Edgar. Well, I don't understand your question. You're asking if you have a fight with a man, where would you hit him first? Well, do we know this man? Do I know him? If I don't know him, like if he's a stranger and he's attacking me, I mean, that's a whole different story compared to, like, a male friend of mine. When I was a child, yes. Before I understood the ramifications of that. Yeah, I was a child. I know, I have not kicked a boy in the nuts in many, many years. In, like, over a decade or something. I look up at Edgar. Your mother talked to me, but did she believe you when you told her that you lived inside this book for 4 months? I don't think so, Edgar admits. She thought I was making it all up. She thought you were a hallucination. If she could be convinced, then from what Orville's saying, all it would take is for us to swap places would be for you, me, your mother, and Queen Marine to want it desperately. Edgar shakes his head. That's not going to happen. She already thinks her mind is playing tricks on her. Then you must find another one of your special tricks, Orville says. We all fall silent, because we know how much harder it is than it seems. I glance up at Edgar and see the defeat written across his features. I think of Frump and how many times each day I wish he were still here. To laugh with me when socks get stuck in a mud bog, to marvel at the sunset paints the beach, to help me finish off one of Queen Marine's lemon tarts. Edgar has already given up, I realize. He has already started to say goodbye. Right, I say briskly, stiffening my spine. We'd best get moving then. We have a lot of pages to cover if we're going to find something that will work to save Jessamine. Edgar shakes his head. It's useless. No, it's not. Even if she's doubtful, as long as the three of us are wishing for the trade, and we have a boost of magic like Seraphima and Frump and Socks had before, then they made a wish, it might work. But we don't have time to find that boost of magic, Edgar says. Believe me, Jules and I scoured every inch of this narrative. Suddenly it hits me. What if we're not looking for a what, but rather a when? Delilah, I begin, when does magic happen in your world? When you use Photoshop, she answers. No, I mean, you make wishes all the time. You wished on stars, on eyelashes, and even once on that strangely shaped bone in the chicken that your mother cooked. Does one of those feel a little more lucky than the others? Jules and Delilah glance at each other. Birthday, they say simultaneously. When you blow out your candle, Delilah tells me, that's the one wish people believe will come true. There's this huge buildup because everyone's watching you make your wish, and you keep it hidden inside and never say it out loud. Eyelashes and shooting stars are for the little things, the wishes that don't really matter. Like when you yell out, wish me good luck. You know it won't make a difference, but you still say it anyway. Your birthday wish, though, that's the one that you think actually might happen. What did you wish for on your last birthday, I ask. Delilah blushes. A prince to sweep me off my feet. Wow, Socks breathes, impressed. That's pretty close. It's my birthday next week, I announce. It was my birthday first, Edgar mutters. I may be eternally 16 chronologically younger than Edgar, but I still celebrate the occasion. We all do in here. We just never grow older. Don't you see, I tell him, it's perfect. If we both ask at the same time on the same birthday for the same thing, surely that will be a big enough wish to bring both you and Jessamine here. I'm quite chuffed to have figured this out in the presence of a wizard, no less, but Edgar doesn't seem enthusiastic. And if it isn't, he says quietly, will it be the last birthday that I have with my mom? I straighten, looking Edgar in the eye. Then we best make sure that it works, I tell him. Queen Marine is pruning the roses in the royal garden when I find her. I snap a rose from its stem and I hand it to her gallantly. A beauty for a beauty, I say, turning on the full force of my charm. If I'm going to convince this woman to give up everything she's ever known, I'd better be at the top of my game. Let me guess, Marine says, you broke another dish? Do you truly think that's the only reason I might come to see your lovely face today? It might be a surprise for you to hear, but I actually enjoy being in your company. She smirks. I'm betting on the broken plate. I sink down on the marble bench. Well, then you'll lose your wager, I say, although I do want to talk to you about something. Ah, you see, she replies, snipping a dead branch. I knew it. Mother's intuition. About that, I take a deep breath. You've said you consider me to be a son, and I've always thought of you as my mother. I don't think family has to be related by blood, do you? Don't you think family is the people who love you the most? Of course, Maureen says. And, well, if your son was going to move away, you'd want to go with him, wouldn't you? Maureen rolls her eyes. I've told you before. You can't live above the cobbler's shop on page 3. It's not seemingly for a prince, and it doesn't make sense to haul a bed out there when you have a perfectly grand one in the castle. I don't want to move to page 3. I want to live in the real world. I pause. With you. Me? In the real world? Queen Marine chokes on a laugh. I wouldn't know the first thing about how to live there. Well, that's why you'll have me. Her eyes find mine. Is this about your Delilah? Not this time, I confess. It's about a boy who's going to lose his mother. And if we switch with them, well, I believe that he won't have to. That's tragic, Maureen says. She sinks down beside me on the marble bench. But why would you think that some ordinary woman and her son might be able to come inside here? You've seen how the other strangers were forced out. This isn't an ordinary woman, I explain. This is Jessamine Jacobs. She wrote this story. And we got an illustration of Queen Marine. So now we know what she looks like. Queen Marine is silent for a moment. She plucks the petals from the rose in her hand one by one, letting them float to the ground. She stops before she picks the final petal and places the stem between us. She gave me life, Maureen says softly. It's the least I can do for her. So much has happened today that I'm not sure that I will get a chance to speak with Delilah alone tonight. But then, shortly after the last star appears in the sky, there is a seam of light along the spine of the book, and I feel myself being drawn towards our usual page. Hi, she says softly. Hello. I can't stop smiling at her. It's as if all the awful truth I learned today has only served to remind me of how lucky I am to have found her. So, you'd best have a spectacular birthday gift for me. You don't know it's going to work, Delilah says. You don't know it's not, I point out. I'm thinking we go out to supper first, and then you give me my present, and to be perfectly honest, I am expecting a cake, preferably chocolate, but I won't quibble. I can't let myself hope that this is going to happen, Delilah says, because the stakes are so high if it doesn't. Not just for us this time, but for Edgar. I look at her, sobering. I know. Winds up here, perfectly healthy. So instead, I just said that I had a really bad day and I needed my mother. But I can't stop thinking. Thank God it's not my mom, and that's awful, right? It's human nature, I suppose, I reply. Is this our fault, Delilah whispers? When Jessamine fainted the first time, shouldn't we have tried to get Edgar back here immediately? She swore to me that she wasn't ill, I say. She lied to you because she didn't want to worry you, the way we didn't want to worry Edgar. Delilah shakes her head. We lost weeks that he could have had with her. Her eyes are full of storms. We can't turn back time, I say. The only thing we could do is try to ensure that Edgar and Jessamine have more of it. Delilah bites her lower lip. I know you look like Edgar, but do you really think Maureen can pass as for Jessamine? Close enough. From what I saw of family photographs when I was in her house, Maureen looks much like Jessamine did when she got married. Although, oddly, her hair color seems to have changed from brown to red. For that matter, King Maurice is the spitting image of Edgar's late father. I tilt my head, considering. We should only hope that we're lucky enough to have to disguise Queen Maureen to make her look exactly like Jessamine. What will happen to Edgar if the book doesn't let Jessamine in? I mean, things out here aren't exactly like they are in there. Food doesn't magically appear. You have to make money to buy it. You have to be able to pay your own mortgage. Edgar's only 17. He shouldn't have to grow up that fast. He won't have to. In fact, he'll never grow up, I say. Delilah raises a brow, still dubious. If this has any chance of working, I tell her, I must believe 100%, and to do that, I need you to believe too. She lowers her lashes so that they cast shadows on her cheeks. For a moment, I think perhaps I've made her cry. When she looks at me again, I realize that desperation and hope are twins, merely altered versions of each other. What kind of frosting, she asks. Buttercream, I say softly. There is a note from the author. It says, hope is what makes you look outside the window to see if it stopped raining. Hope is what makes you believe that he'll text you back. Hope is why you buy your jeans a little tight. Hope is why you put a spoon under your pillow and wear your pajamas inside out when you hear there could be a snow day. Hope is why you get out of bed in the morning and why you dream at night. Hope is what makes us believe that things can only get better. Hope is what keeps us going. All right, it's 1, 2, 3. Got 3 more chapters left. That's it, of this entire book. Let me see what time it is. I'm just going to keep reading. So we're going to go back over to Delilah's point of view. Just when I think that things couldn't possibly get more complicated, Harvey happens. On the day that I'm hosting a school-wide Halloween birthday party, something I never thought I would do in my lifetime, a hurricane that's supposed to blow out to sea in the Carolinas takes an abrupt and unexpected turn and makes its way up the eastern seaboard. Hurricane Harvey goes from a trickle of rain to hammering on the roof, and the lights flicker as Jules and I sit in my bedroom, crossing off details on a checklist. I've got a bunch of 6-packs of Coke and 12 bags of potato chips, I say, and I talk my mom out of bobbing for apples. She's still insisting on making vegetables in the shape of a skeleton with dip. This is going to be the worst party in the history of parties, Jules mutters. Well, what am I supposed to do? I argue. My mother and Edgar's mother are going to be there. I didn't think beer pong would be a viable option. It's totally lame to throw a party at my house for Edgar's party with his own mother there as a guest, but this is the only way that our plan is going to succeed. Besides, it doesn't matter if my reputation tanks because of this, since if it works, Oliver will be here, and he's the only one whose opinion matters to me. It's been a week since Jessamine was released from the hospital, a week that we've spent plotting with Oliver and the characters in the book to make sure that this swap is flawless. Edgar has been mostly out of the loop, consumed with taking care of his mom. He says the hardest part is how normal Jessamine seems, with the exception of the anti-seizure medication she has to take every day, and a headache that won't go away. She might as well be fighting the common cold. Has Edgar told Jessamine why we're really throwing this party? I ask. Does she even know that we're trying to get her inside the book? No, she still doesn't believe that any of this is real. Edgar thought that it would be better if she didn't know what we were planning. That way, she's more likely to agree to be here. It makes sense. Jessamine totally didn't buy Edgar's secret portal theory. Even seeing Oliver alive and talking was something she managed to dismiss as a hallucination caused by medication. Since this all hinges on a wish, it won't do any good for Jessamine to actively doubt the process. For all we know, that could be the one thing that makes this go wrong. Hanging on the back of my closet door is the costume borrowed from Miss Pingree and the drama department. Jules is going as Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. She was the one who made the astute observation that if the switch actually did pan out, we were going to end up with a guy in a prince costume in the middle of a high school party. Since it's only a week away from Halloween, it made perfect sense to dress everyone up, so that if Oliver and Maureen do arrive in the present day, nobody will blink an eye. So, Jules asks, her gaze sliding away from me, did you hear from Chris? Is he coming? I look up at her. I had to invite him. He's Edgar's best friend. Well, Oliver's. You know what I mean. It's going to be so awkward, Jules says. I haven't talked to him since I ended things, and I didn't exactly give him a reason. I put my hand on her shoulder. Are you okay with all of this? With Edgar leaving? I kind of have to be, right? She meets my gaze. Let's be real. He wouldn't stay out here with me if the cost is losing his mom. For what it's worth, I tell her, he really did like you. He's just got much bigger problems to think about right now. She forces a smile. Don't worry about me. I'm tougher than I look. I laugh, glancing at Jules' ripped black tights. The studded leather cuffs on her wrists, the safety pin she's wearing as an earring, and the thick black eyeliner. That's terrifying, I say. Remind me to never get in a fight with you. Suddenly, there's a crash of thunder and the lights dim and then buzz back to life. I cannot believe this, I mutter. What if no one shows up? Does it even matter? The only people who have to show up will. Besides, there's nothing like a little natural disaster to spice up a party. Jules glances at her phone. I have to go home and change. I told Edgar that I'd pick him and his mom up at 7, and my face paint alone takes half an hour. We both stand up, and impulsively she hugs me. It's gonna work. It has to, I say. As soon as I hear Jules' car pull away, I realize that I've done all of the checks for this party, but I haven't thought about the preparations on the other side, and if Oliver needs my help, or if something's going wrong, there's no way he can even tell me until I open the book. It's not on my nightstand where it usually rests. Getting on my knees, I scan underneath the bed, I pull back the covers and the sheets, searching. I dump the contents of my backpack, I tear my whole room apart, rummaging through every drawer and yanking every book off my shelves, but I can't find it. Did I leave it at school? At Edgar's? Where was it the last time I talked to Oliver? Last night, under the covers, before I went to sleep, and this morning, I left the book on my nightstand. I know I did, but then why isn't it there? How could I possibly lose my own boyfriend? And how could I possibly misplace the book on the one day that I need it most? I fling open the door to my room and I run downstairs. Mom, I yell, teetering on the edge between shouting and sobbing. Have you seen my book? She turns in the middle of wiping down the counter. What book? You know what book. Between the lines. I pull open random kitchen drawers, rummaging. I need it right now. Delilah, calm down, my mother says. I put it on the bookshelf with the photo albums. Why? I ask, running into the living room and tracing the spines of the books until I find the one with the gold lettering. I grab it and clutch it to my chest, feeling my heart pounding against the cover. My mother walks up to me, surprised at my outburst. She reaches out to pull the fairy tale from my arms, but I twist away from her, shielding it with my body. Delilah, she asks gently, what is it about this book? Why are you so attached to it? You wouldn't get it. Try me. Talk to me. I thought it was just a phase, one that you grew out of when you started dating and making more friends. But now, all of a sudden, you're right back where you used to be, obsessed with a children's fairy tale. What happened? My throat is jammed with 100 responses, none of which she would understand. Stay out of my stuff, I yell, and I run back upstairs. When I reach my room, I slam the door and open to page 43. Oliver is still shimmying into position on the rock wall, clutching at his chest. When he sees me, he lets go of his tunic, and several rolls of bright-colored streamers fall from the folds of velvet, unrolling to the edges of the page. Why are you interrupting me? He asks. I'm in the middle of planning my own birthday party. I know, I tell him. I just wanted to make sure everything was going all right. Well, it rather was until you interrupted me, he smiles. As he's saying this, though, I know he's not really upset to see me. And your preparations? They were going fine until I temporarily lost you, I say. My mother moved the book. Ah, right. I forgot to tell you with all that's been happening with Jessamine's illness. But your mother, she read us the other day. She what? It was when you were at school, presumably. I thought it was you opening the book as usual, except it wasn't. Are you serious? What is she doing in my room? Snooping? Maybe she just wanted a good story to read. Oliver looks up. We are a book, you know, believe it or not. We do have day jobs. It's been so long since we were able to act the fairy tale out. Everyone was quite delighted. Everyone except me, he confesses. But what if something went wrong? What if she recognized you? I did my best I could to keep her from seeing my face, Oliver admits. She didn't seem to think that anything was amiss. This time, I pointed out. Well, Oliver says, if all goes well tonight, perhaps there won't be a next time. He grins up at me broadly. I truly do adore talking to you, Delilah, but I can't leave this page unless you're gone. He holds up 2 rolls of streamers, and I have an entire kingdom to decorate. I hide a smile. I love you too, I say, and very gently I close the book. It takes a considerable amount of planning and effort to get dressed into my costume. The first layer is a hoop skirt and a corset, followed by a petticoat that gets tied and knotted around my waist. After that comes the gown, draped with satin and lace. The cherry on top is the tiara, a little comb that gets wired into my hair and twinkles with fake gems. I keep my Converse sneakers on underneath because no one will see them. Then I step up to the dreaded full-length mirror inside my closet door, where I usually take one last glance at myself before I leave for school, always finding something to criticize. My hair, my hips, my freckles. But this time, I just stop and stare. I look pretty. The pink gown makes my cheeks look rosy. The way the waist nips in makes me seem like I actually have a figure. My hair, for once, doesn't look like a bird's nest. It's twisted up partway to hold the little crown, and the rest cascades into curls, thanks to the humidity of Hurricane Harvey. I wonder what Oliver will think when he sees me, if he sees me. Shaking my head clear, I force myself to think positively. When, I say firmly out loud, if Jessamine is right, if wishes are all that it takes for the dream to come true, then it's at least worth trying. So although I feel silly, although I am not in the habit of talking to myself, I close my eyes, clasp my hands, and hope. Please, I whisper, bring him back to me. At that moment, there is a crack of thunder so loud that it rattles the house, and a flash of lightning fills the room. The next moment, the power goes out and everything goes dark. It just doesn't seem like a great omen. If any party were suited to a lack of electricity, it would have been a Halloween bash. My mother and I have set candles all over the house on every available saucer that we own. So many that I suggested inviting the fire department just so that they wouldn't have to make an extra trip. The flames flicker and cast shadows on the walls, making everything look 10 times creepier. The raindrops that race down the glass panes of the window are illuminated by the candlelight, and maybe because there's nothing else to do, no TV or computer, the turnout is huge. There are kids dressed as pirates and cowboys and cops. James and his boyfriend are salt and pepper shakers. Raj is wearing a milk carton on his head with the face cut out of it, and the words missing across the top. Really? I ask when he first comes inside. It's clever, he tells me. Chicks dig clever. But really? Brains over body, Raj insists. So where are the hot girls? I watch him scan the crowd, his eyes lighting on Claire, who is trying to channel sexy nerd with her costume, but seems to be simply wearing what she had on yesterday with a pair of hipster glasses. Score, Raj says, and he moves off in her direction. Everyone seems to be having a decent time except Chris, who's moping by himself in a corner. I sidle up to him as best as someone can, sidling wearing a giant petticoat. Hey, I say. He glances down at me from beneath the brim of his red Super Mario hat. His lips twist beneath his fake mustache. I'm guessing you heard? I reach up and pat his shoulder. I'm really sorry it didn't work out, but seriously, you're not going to have any trouble finding anyone else. He tries to smile but doesn't quite manage. Did she tell you why? Chris asks. Was it something I did? Trust me, it's not you. It's just really bad timing right now. He looks down at me, his expression pained. I don't want things to get weird, you know. I mean, you being Jules' best friend and all. It's only weird if you make it that way, I promise. Just then, a car drives up, its headlights cutting across the room as it pulls up to the curb. I'm expecting Jules with the guest of honor and his mom, but to my absolute shock, when I open the door, there stands Allie McAndrews and her entourage. Her minions are all dressed like sexy cats, and Allie, she's wearing a gown that looks identical to mine. I didn't expect you to come, I say. Allie raises a brow. Please, I'm the one who's going to make this party. You should be honored. I am not going to let Allie spoil this night. Well, clearly you have good taste in costumes, I say amiably, gesturing at our matching dresses and trying to make a lame joke. 2 princesses in a pod. Allie looks horrified. I am not just some stupid Disney princess, she says. I am Princess Peach, Chris finishes, grabbing her hand, bowing over it, in his blue overalls. Allie beams. Thank you for rescuing me, Mario, she twitters. Chris laughs. I didn't peg you as a Super Mario fan. Are you kidding me? Allie says, animated in a way that I've never seen her before. It's the best game ever. What else would I do while waiting for my toes to dry? I stifle a laugh, wishing Jules were here to see this. The cats standing behind Allie look at each other, completely confused. I guess that it makes sense. It's not every day that you learn that your queen bee is a gamer. Allie turns on them. Oh, please, Brittany, we all know that you still watch My Little Pony, and Chloe, your hairdresser is not the only one who knows that you're not a natural blonde.
She sounds like Allie. Mean, that is, but there's something different about it. She seems annoyed, as if she's sick to having to live up to an audience 24/7. It's almost as if she's, well, human. Thank God Super Mario 3D World upgraded Peach, Allie adds. I mean, how lame was it when the new Super Mario Brothers came out for the Wii? Nintendo couldn't afford the extra programming for her dress, so she wasn't a playable character. Chris's jaw drops. Marry me, he jokes. She slips her arm through his. How about we start with a Diet Coke? As they walk into the crowd, the door opens again. Jules is holding an umbrella over herself and Jessamine, who is dressed in scrubs with a surgical cap covering her hair and a mask obscuring half of her face. Jessamine catches me staring at her costume. I used to be a writer, she explains, her eyes dancing above the mask. I like irony. And I like dry clothes, Edgar mutters, standing in the rain behind them. Any chance we can move inside? For a moment, when he first steps in wearing a full Prince costume that matches Oliver's, I can't breathe. They look that much alike, which is why I remind myself this is going to work. Happy birthday, I say. Not until 9:15, Edgar replies. Remember, not wanting to leave anything to chance, we have arranged with Oliver to blow out the candles on his birthday cake at the exact moment of Edgar's birth. My mother, wearing her witch costume, approaches when she sees Edgar enter. You must be Jessamine, she says. I'm Grace. It's so nice to finally meet you. Thanks for taking care of Edward a few weeks ago, Jessamine replies. I've had some health issues lately, and it's really nice to know that he's people looking out for him. I follow her gaze as it lights on my mother, me, the crowd of Edgar's friends. These are the people in whose hands she thinks she will be leaving her son when she's gone. Gradually, everyone notices that Edgar is finally here. His name is chanted, echoing around the house, birthday wishes falling like confetti. My mother turns to Jessamine. I'm just going to get the cake ready if you want to come into the kitchen. Unless, of course, raging is your thing. She grins. The kitchen sounds great. As they walk off, Jules, Edgar, and I huddle together. Is Oliver ready? Edgar asks. I guess so, I tell him. Are you? Yeah, Jules has an extra set of scrubs in her bag for Maureen to dress into when she gets here. People might notice if my mom's costume suddenly changes in the middle of the party. His eyes flicker to the kitchen. I'm just going to go make sure that she doesn't need anything. As he heads through the crowd, I'm the only one who sees the pain written on Jules's face. She turns away and her eyes widen. Allie is here? Who invited her? Herself, I say mildly. But Jules, there's something you need to know. Just then, Chris walks up to Allie holding a can of Diet Coke. Their heads bend together, laughing as they talk. And now, this night can't get any worse, Jules moans. I'm sorry. It's okay. He deserves to be happy, Jules says. But she isn't looking at Chris. She's staring at Edgar as he weaves away from her. The party plays out before me like a movie. Like something I'm watching but not part of. Laughter and talking and dancing and movement. Conversations full of gestures that look, at a distance, like charades. Edgar comes up behind me, close enough to whisper in my ear. Who knew a hurricane would be so much fun, he says. I turn, and when I see other people watching us, I thread my fingers through his, putting on a show. I was just thinking, I say, about how it doesn't rain in the book. He frowns, then nods. You're right, I guess I never really noticed. When Oliver first came here and it rained, he asked who was crying. I think that's the only precipitation that he's ever seen, a reader's tears. I look up at Edgar. You know how nobody likes the rain here? How we duck out of it or complain when our shoes get wet or get pissed off when we forget to bring an umbrella? Well, Oliver loved it. He thought it was the most miraculous thing, that the sky could leak and fix itself again. That first storm, he ran outside, flung his arms wide, and just turned in circles, laughing as he got drenched. I glance out the window again. The last week that Oliver was here, it rained. I noticed when he came to school, he was carrying an umbrella, and I thought, did I do that to him? Did I make him stop believing in magic? Maybe we just adapt to where we need to be, Edgar says. Maybe that is the magic. I take a deep breath and I nod as Jules approaches. She fixed her makeup, but I can tell that she's been crying. Her eyes are red-rimmed. It's past 9, she says. Should we get ready? I look from Edgar to Jules. They're staring so intently at each other that I expect the space between them to spontaneously combust. Can I have a minute with Jules, he asks. Of course, I say, but I'm pretty sure they don't hear me in the kitchen. They don't hear me. In the kitchen, I find my mother and Jessamine sticking 18 candles in the cake. One for good luck. I tell her desperately, you can't forget that. It's the most important. My mother looks at me oddly, but heads to the pantry for an extra candle. Jessamine puts her hand on my arm. Thank you, Delilah, for doing this for Edgar and for me. I open my mouth to tell her that she'll be celebrating many more birthdays with her son, but then I catch myself. Edgar loves you, I tell her, more than anything. He'd give up everything for you, you know. I'm a very lucky woman, Jessamine says, and over her surgical mask, her eyes are too bright. She blinks away her tears as my mother returns, holding not just the candle, but also a box of matches. I glance at my phone. It's 9:10. Let's do this, I say, exhaling. When my mother lights the candles, I go into the living room, turn off the laptop that's playing music. Conversations trickle, dying into silence. As everyone turns to me, "Where's the birthday boy?" I ask. "Here," Jules announces. She walks into the room, pulling Edgar behind her. I have no idea what transpired between them, but they both look like they've been through a war. Jules lets go of Edgar when he reaches the dining room table and comes to stand beside me, across from him. It's 9:12. Happy birthday to you, my mother starts singing, and everyone joins her. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Edgar. Happy birthday to you. I look at my phone. It's 9:13. Crap. Why is that song so short? Edgar stares at me, panicking. Are you 1? I call out. Are you 2? Are you 3? I clap each number, and eventually the crowd chimes in. By the time we reach 18, it's 9:14. I watch the seconds tick. Okay, I vamp. I hope you've got a great wish. 10 more seconds. That's our cue. I nod at Edgar, who leans down towards the cake. It casts a glow over his features as his brow furrows and he concentrates. I see his lips moving silently as he says the words that have been prearranged. Right now, inside the book that is safely waiting on in my bedroom, Oliver is saying the exact same sentence. I wish for a life with the person I love most. The alarm I set on my phone dings, 9:15. At the last moment, Jules rushes forward so that she's close enough to Edgar to touch him. Suddenly there's a crash as a burst of wind blows open one of the old, uninsulated windows in our house. The gust swirls through the room, stealing the breath of every candle. For a heartbeat, the room goes pitch black, and then, with a whir of machinery and electronic beeping, the power comes back on. Awesome wish, dude, Raj calls out. I blink, unaccustomed to the bright light, and immediately I feel sick. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. Edgar is still bent over his cake, his eyes closed. Jules has her hand on his back. Edgar, Jules whispers, his eyes open at the sound of her voice. He turns towards Jules and walks right past her, staring straight at me as if I'm the only person in the room. He smiles crookedly, a smile I know, a smile I fell in love with, and then Oliver swings me into his arms, kissing me. All right. That leaves 3 chapters for tomorrow. So we will continue this tomorrow. Once again, that is Off the Page by Jodi Picoult and Samantha Van Leer. And we're almost done. That's 3 more chapters, and that's the end of the book. And then we'll start a different book next time. Did I just close it without... I did close it without putting the bookmark in. You guys should have told me. There we go. Okay. Now that's the end. That's the end of the book for now, for tomorrow, and then I will finish it tomorrow. So I will see you guys then. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.